The soft evening light cast a warm glow over the cozy little cafe on Maple Street. Aria pushed open the door, her heart skipping a beat as memories rushed back. This was the place she and her high school love had spent so much time together, sharing milkshakes, laughter, and dreams about the future. Life had taken her far from this small town, but whenever she came back, she couldn't help but think of him, her first love. His name was Jake, the kind, dependable boy with that charming smile. They had promised to stay together, but life had other plans. Aria had left for the city chasing her dream of becoming a designer, and they had lost touch. She became successful with her own fashion line, but even as she reached her goals, she often wondered what might have been. As she sat by the window, lost in thought, a familiar laugh caught her attention. She turned, heart pounding, and saw Jake standing at the counter. He looked almost the same, tall with a warm smile and easygoing charm. He was a bit more rugged now, with a few lines on his face that only made him more handsome. Jake spotted her, and his eyes widened in surprise. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. He walked over, his gaze never leaving hers. "Aria Thompson," he said with a grin. "I almost didn't recognize you." "Jake Cooper," Aria replied, her smile widening. "You haven't changed a bit." They both laughed, and suddenly, it was as if no time had passed. They talked about high school, their old friends, and the silly things they used to do. Each laugh and memory brought them closer, and Aria felt the familiar spark she hadn't felt in years. Finally, Jake's smile softened, and he looked at her with a mix of curiosity and something else, something deeper. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked, his voice quiet. Aria's heart skipped again. She had thought about him so many times, wondering what might have been if they had stayed together. But she wasn't sure what to say. She took a sip of her coffee, trying to gather her thoughts. "All the time," she admitted, her voice just as soft. "But life happened, you know. I had my dreams and so did you. I didn't want to hold you back." Jake nodded, but she could see a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I understand. Back then, I guess I was scared too. I thought that if we tried to make it work, we'd only end up hurting each other." They sat in silence for a moment, both feeling the weight of all that had been left unsaid. But sitting there together, Aria felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The hours flew by as they talked, catching up on everything they had missed. Aria learned that Jake had become a high school teacher, working with kids and helping them follow their own dreams. He stayed in their hometown, close to family and the friends they grew up with, while she had built a life in the city. They decided to take a walk around town, just like they used to. As they strolled through the familiar streets, memories came flooding back. They passed the high school, now dark and empty, and both of them stopped gazing at the building. "Remember our first dance in the gym?" Jake asked, his eyes twinkling. "How could I forget?" Aria laughed. "You stepped on my toes at least 5 times. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was nervous. Couldn't believe I had the courage to ask you." They fell silent, letting the memory hang between them. Then Jake turned to her, his gaze intense. "Aria, do you think there could be a second chance for us?" Her heart raced. She hadn't expected him to ask, hadn't realized he might feel the same pull that she did. She looked at him, seeing the kindness and warmth that had always been there. But they were different people now, with different lives. "I don't know, Jake," she replied, her voice trembling. "We've both changed so much. We've made lives without each other." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I know. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we needed to grow on our own to become the people we are now." They continued walking in silence, lost in their own thoughts. Aria felt the pull of the life she had built in the city, but she also felt something deeper, the connection she'd shared with Jake, a love that had never really faded. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together, rekindling their friendship and rediscovering each other. They laughed, shared stories, and even went to some of their old favorite spots. Aria was amazed at how easy it was to be with him, how natural it felt to talk about anything and everything. But as their feelings grew, so did their fears. Aria knew she had a life waiting for her back in the city, a career she had worked so hard for. And Jake had his own roots here, his job, his family, and his students. They couldn't ignore the differences that had kept them apart. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Jake stopped and took her hand. He looked at her with that same serious expression, the one that always made her heart flutter. "Aria, I don't want to have regrets. Life's too short for that. I know it won't be easy, and I know we have our own lives, but I'd rather try and fail than spend my life wondering what could have been." Aria felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had always been afraid to take risks in love, always focused on her dreams and career. But standing there, with Jake's hand in hers, she realized that some things were worth the risk. "I feel the same, Jake," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't want to wonder what could have been anymore." They stood there in the soft glow of the evening light, holding hands, ready to give love a second chance. This time, they knew who they were and what they wanted. And with that understanding, they took a leap of faith, hoping that this time it would be enough. And so Aria and Jake's story began again, not as two young dreamers, but as two people who had lived, loved, and grown. They knew that love wasn't just about holding on, but also about letting go of the past and embracing the future together.